Hello, and thank you for joining us for the second of our Designer Studios, a series in which we find out a little bit more about the spaces and places where creatives do their very best work. Now, I'm delighted today to be joined by Hugh and Howard Miller, co-founders of furniture studio H. Miller Bros, and who may already be familiar to designer readers as winners of the Kitchen Design of the Year over 30k category at last year's Designer Awards. Welcome to you both.
Hello, thanks for having us.
Thanks for your time. Yeah, thanks for your time joining us. I wanted to start straight in. For those who aren't so familiar with what you guys have been doing, can you tell us just a little bit about the company, when you started and where you're based?
So Hugh and I have been sharing a workshop and an office for 7 years now, and we've been collaborating for longer than that. We both had our own separate businesses. Hugh as a furniture design studio, and I'm an architect. And we'd always worked really closely together, always each other's kind of second pair of eyes on a design or whatever. About a year and a half ago, we decided to kind of make it formal and start an actual company. And we're focusing on one-off kitchens that are tailored for each client. We don't make two alike. We're also doing furniture, sort of bespoke commissions and things like that.
And so where are you guys based? Where's HQ, as it were?
Where's home? We are from Liverpool, although you can't necessarily hear it in the accent. And yeah, we're based just outside Liverpool city centre in the Baltic Triangle, which is Liverpool's kind of creative quarter. We are in a warehouse, one of the old warehouses near the docks. We've got a floor there. We're using the original hoist machine that comes with the warehouse.
Wow. Okay, so what's the space like then? How many people work in the studio and sort of how's it set up?
Well, when we moved into the space, it was it's the second floor of an old dock building, so it was used for storage, and actually there's all sorts of weight limits and things like that written on the walls. You could actually fill the space entirely with water. That's how strong it is. You can store 3 tons a square meter, which is pretty strong. And the only thing that was in the space when we moved in were the columns. We've literally put in an acoustic floor. We built our unit and divided it from the rest of the floor, which is now artist studios, and we've put in literally everything. It's not necessarily a traditional woodworking shop in that the floors are wood. There's no ground floor access, and the columns mean that we're sort of constantly circling, like sort of chasing someone around a set of trees. But actually for us, it's been a really wonderful space to work. We've been here almost 7 years now, and H. Miller Bros was founded here, as Howard says, a couple of years ago. It's kind of a traditional furniture making workshop more than it is a sort of a mass production kitchen workshop, for good reason, which is that's what our background is. And so we have a lot of Waney edge timber in the workshop that we process into flat pieces for construction. We have a lot of birch plywood and other panel products for making like the high-end carcasses that we put together. We have a lot of hand tools, actually. A lot of our work is still done by hand, including some Japanese tools, which is my personal sort of passion.
It sounds like it must be a fairly fluid kind of workshop based on the varying projects that you have. Is it sort of set out in a rigid way, or do you adapt based on the actual work that you're doing at that time?
It's a bit that, I suppose that the way to think of that of answering that question is a bit like, if someone has a studio flat, they tend to have to use the same area for sitting as they do for dining. And that's a bit like our workshop. It's 150 square meters, which is not huge, and we really have to maximize that for all of the processes we have. There are distinct areas within it. So there are distinct storage, handworking, machine working, and finishing areas. Particularly the finishing area at the back of the workshop is the newest addition and has really helped us to improve the speed and the quality of our finishing. But all the other spaces, they sort of merge into each other. I would say the area that we probably have to be most sort of cognizant and strategic about is storage. We have to be really careful not to allow storing things to affect the way that processes happen in the workshop.
Lean manufacturing. It's lean, but it needs to be leaner. That's what the message is.
It's one of those things. It's the same for me in my house, really, in terms of trying not to store stuff that I shouldn't be storing. But I imagine in a workshop, it's vital because you need that working space, don't you?
Sometimes it can feel a little bit. I sometimes get a bit guilty about the amount of timber that we throw away, and it's all recycled, so it's not necessarily an environmental issue, but a lot of the stuff that we throw away, I used to use for projects, but now just the quantity that we're creating means that big hunks of oak that I used to keep hold of, we just can't store the volume that we're creating.
Yeah, it's a real shame. But I wanted to ask you guys about, really both of you, about sources of inspiration, because I know from when we featured you in the magazine a little while ago, we ran an interview with you, and you were talking about you get inspired by travel and a lot of external kind of factors like that. But I'm sort of thinking within the workshop, within the studio, is there anything you use or ideas or sources of ideas, such as, I don't know, mood boards or books, or where do you get your ideas when you're actually in the workshop and you're working on the project?
Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting one, because we're basically trying to do a different thing, a different design for every client. So it does need to be kind of unique and special and different. And our way of, we have a process which we've kind of honed over the years, which is designed to kind of keep the project going at a clip while also teasing out what's kind of interesting and peculiar about that person and their situation and their place. So it can kind of come from anywhere. I'd say if we don't do something new in a project, then I kind of feel like that's a missed opportunity. Where does it come from, though? I mean, I'm trying to think of some good examples.
If I could just jump in there, one of the things that's sort of I suppose a bit more interesting and unusual about Howard and I is that we train as architects, and so a lot of our inspiration actually comes from architecture rather than necessarily from traditional forms of kitchen design. And actually, that stands us in really good stead to do these genuinely original pieces of cabinetry that we specialize in, because the things that the inspiration we're drawing on is often things that haven't been introduced into kitchens before. Just as an example, when we did the Furniture Maker's Kitchen, which won the award earlier in the year for your magazine, that draws from vernacular Japanese temple design and from mid-century detailing from sort of Scandinavia, sort of Danish Hans Wagner-esque sort of detailing. Those things aren't necessarily what you would expect from a kitchen studio, especially when we're at the end of the market, which has a lot of archetypes in terms of traditional Devol-esque kitchens and super
style.
Yeah, or the alternate, which is this sort of very high tech, clean German style, both of which we like very much, but is not our style. So it's really that's I think where we get our inspiration from. It's basically our backgrounds in things other than kitchens.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Well,
I've done a lot of teaching over the years as well in architecture schools, and when you see 60 students all doing the same brief, different outcome each one, and you've got to help them all through. It kind of it gives you a kind of mental agility, to sort of harbour that many different ways of doing it in your head at one moment.
I think it's a case of daring to be different, but in actual fact, you need to be different to separate yourself from everyone else out there, don't you?
For sure.
Especially us. We're new kids on the block, and we're not in London. For both of those reasons, we need to have some calling cards that basically mean that people are coming to us because they want us, not because they're considering us amongst a plethora of other similar kitchen studios.
Yeah, sure. Well, you alluded to it earlier on. You mentioned about the craftsmanship aspect to the space that you work in. In terms of bringing to life the ideas that you have for new kitchens, new furniture, what technology or tools do you use? I mean, you mentioned that some of it's quite traditional. Is that primarily how you work, all the traditional tooling?
I mean, yeah, we make a lot of things. We basically make them by hand, and we have the traditional woodworking tools like a bench saw and spindle molder, bandsaw, planer, things like that. But actually, we at the moment don't use any CNC, and we use spray finishers, which I suppose is effectively is a semi-automated process. But a lot of the work is done by hand with hand tools. I mean, I'm looking out into the workshop right now, and we have somebody chiseling out a mortise with a 1960s mortise chisel. And there is also a trimmer router being used to put a 5mm bevel onto something. So that's about as technological as it gets at the moment. That being said, we are, both Howard and I are inspired by new processes and new ways of doing things.
We're developing a, how you can go to kind of, say, for example, you went to Howden's or IKEA or wherever, you can get like a kind of insert for your cutlery tray. Yeah, often they're like plastic inserts. So we've been looking into this mycelium, which is kind of where you mix a kind of a fungus with some kind of substrate like sawdust or waste products, which we have quite a lot of. So that would be good. And you basically you mold it over mold, and the fungus digest the material partially and kind of binds it together. Then you stop the process going, and you're basically left with a kind of rigid form. It's being used quite a lot at the moment for kind of heavy duty eco packaging. Some people are looking into using it for insulation. So like we're thinking about possibly.
But depending on what aggregate you use, it can be very beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes it looks a little bit hair shirt for me, but I think that we can, we're looking into it. We want to try and make it into something that can deliver a quite finished, high-end kind of form that can go neatly into the drawer insert. But the beauty of it is that you can mold it. You could basically make a mold for anything. So if a client's got something special they want to store, we can basically copy their, grandfather's pocket watch or whatever, make that shape, cast a mycelium around it, and then they'll have a drawer that's got a perfect niche for that thing they want to store. So I'm kind of, I think it's a really cool idea. Yeah, I'm just thinking of some of the other kind of. Sometimes we'll make something special for a client. We made this bread box for somebody recently, and we're kind of toying with the idea of starting to make them as a kind of run of product, so that you can kind of buy them straight directly from the website, kind of kitchen accessories and things like that.
You mentioned about having to work around the sort of pillars and work around some of the constraints of the workspace that you have. I wanted to ask, if you could change something about your space, what would it be? Is it just a case of you'd like a bigger space?
I want to be on the ground floor.
It would make life a lot easier, I guess. Yeah.
it can be a real challenge and headache working out how to get getting materials in is not so difficult. Getting some of the larger pieces we make out can be quite challenging. Sometimes we resort to making special crates to be able to hoist things down safely and so that they don't get damaged on the way. We've got it down to a bit of a fine art, and we've got huge things out of this building that you wouldn't believe. The truss in the furniture maker's kitchen was taken out as a single piece. Things like that. That's over 4 meters long. Right. But being on the ground floor would really make our lives easier.
Also, it would allow us to get, because the weight limit is fine for the floors, but the thing is getting some of the larger machines in. We've used telehandlers and things to kind of post them in through the door. But yeah, I mean, I would like to get a CNC machine at some point, not because I want to use it to kind of make things more, efficient and productive. It's because I think it'll just allow us to get even more insanely complicated on things. And I want to see what it can do, really push it to its limits. But we can't get one in our space at the moment. It's just it's a big machine. It's getting that in through the door. So yeah, I agree with you. Ground floor is what we would change if we could.
I wanted to ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, how tidy is your desk and your work area?
I think Hugh is tidier than I am. I like having stuff around me. I don't like, old coffee cups and things like that, but I like having, that piece, that little funny model that you made for a project ages ago, and bits of, kind of almost like a scrapbook around you. Because when, he was saying before, when we said, where does inspiration come from? And I think he was what he quite neatly said was that you sort of transpose it from one field of design to another, and that's what makes it kind of interesting and original. And I think that having those things, those bits of, like graphic design is I'm really into like graphic design, and like having the materials around, if anyone ever offers to send us kind of like a swatch of this or something like that, I'm interested. And then, and having all that around, and suddenly if you are struggling for a bit of inspiration or something, having that kind of flotsam jetsam of kind of half finished bits of ideas around, they tend to sort of dislodge it and kind of keep the design process going. So messy, I think.
Thank you.
It's interesting. You should ask this right now, because I happen to have cleaned the office this morning. So actually, it's like a 9 or a 9.5.
Wow.
Okay. I have to say that the workshop itself is generally around an 8.5 or a 9. We because of the reduced space, we're pretty tight on.
We up every day, right? It's cleaned every day. At the end of every day, yeah.
It's also, I mean, it possibly sounds a little bit OCD, but the cleanliness of the space is directly proportional to the quality of the work. If you go into the McLaren's factory, you won't see oil dripping on the floor and things. You'll see everything has its place, and everybody knows exactly which tool to use for which job, and I think there's something in that. And we certainly don't have a space as sterile as that, but we do like to keep a bit of a tight ship.
Well, that's food for thought, not least for the state of my desk, which I'm not going to turn the camera around. I always say that's not going to happen. So yeah, I admire you for keeping the space as tidy and efficient as that. But listen, I just thank you very much for your time, both Hugh and Howard, and for giving us some insight into your designer studio. Much appreciated that you could spend some time with us.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having us.
And thanks to everyone for watching. I hope you'll join us again soon for the next designer studio at designerati.co.uk. In the meantime, bye for now.